Long ago, the Israelites lived in Egypt, where life was once good and peaceful. But a new pharaoh came to power, and he feared the Israelites because they had grown so numerous. To control them, Pharaoh made the Israelites slaves, forcing them to build cities and carry heavy stones under the burning sun. Their lives became harsh and full of suffering, with cruel masters beating them if they slowed down. The Israelites cried out to God, remembering his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Even as Pharaoh made their work harder, hope flickered in their hearts. They believed God could hear their prayers, even in the darkest times. The Israelites' faith endured, even as their burdens grew. They longed for freedom and trusted that God would not forget them. The Pharaoh's heart remained hard, but the Israelites' hope was stronger. Their story of suffering was about to become a story of deliverance. The Israelites waited, praying for a sign that God would rescue them. Their faith was their only comfort in a land that had become a place of sorrow. But God was listening, and soon, everything would change. The Israelites' cries would not go unanswered. Their journey to freedom was about to begin. And so, the story of Exodus unfolds. Pharaoh, still afraid, ordered every Israelite baby boy to be thrown into the Nile. In this time of terror, a brave mother named Jochebed hid her newborn son for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she placed him in a waterproof basket and set it among the reeds of the river. His sister Miriam watched from a distance, her heart pounding with worry. Pharaoh's daughter came to the river, saw the basket and found the crying baby inside. Moved with compassion, she decided to adopt him, naming him Moses, to pull out because she drew him from the water. Miriam approached the princess and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby. The princess agreed, and Jochebed was able to care for her own son until he was old enough to live in the palace. Moses grew up as the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, safe in the palace but born to lead his people. In the midst of cruelty, God's plan for rescue began with a single, hidden child. Moses' life was spared for a purpose greater than anyone could imagine. The river that was meant to bring death became the path to hope. God was already at work, preparing a deliverer for his people. Moses' journey from the basket to the palace was just the beginning. The Israelites' prayers were being answered in ways they could not yet see. Even in the darkest times, God's light shines through. Moses would grow up to change the fate of his people forever. The story of Exodus was moving forward, one miracle at a time. Hope was alive on the banks of the Nile. Moses grew up as a prince in Egypt, but he never forgot his true heritage. He saw the suffering of his people and in a moment of anger, killed an Egyptian who was beating an Israelite. When word spread, Moses fled Egypt to escape Pharaoh's wrath. He journeyed into the desert, arriving in Midian, where he helped the daughters of a priest named Jethro. Jethro welcomed Moses, who soon married one of his daughters and became a shepherd. For 40 years, Moses lived a quiet life, far from Egypt and his people's pain. Moses' days were filled with tending sheep, but God was preparing him for something greater. The desert became a place of transformation, shaping Moses into a leader. Though he was far from Egypt, Moses' story was not over. God had not forgotten his people or the promise of deliverance. Moses' time in the wilderness was part of a bigger plan. Sometimes the journey to greatness begins in the most unlikely places. Moses was about to encounter God in a way that would change everything. The quiet of the desert was about to be broken by a call from heaven. The next chapter of Exodus was about to begin. Moses' destiny was calling. One day, while tending sheep near Mount Horeb, Moses saw a bush on fire, but it wasn't burning up. Curious, he approached, and a voice called from the flames, "Moses! Moses!" God told him to remove his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. God revealed himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He told Moses, "I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring them out." Moses was afraid and doubted his ability, but God assured him, "I will be with you." The burning bush was a sign that God's power could turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Moses' life as a shepherd was over. His mission as a deliverer was beginning. God's call was clear, and the time for rescue had come. Moses' fear was real, but God's promise was greater. The fate of a nation rested on one man's obedience. The story of Exodus was moving from the desert to the throne of Egypt. Moses would face Pharaoh armed not with power but with God's command. The burning bush marked the start of a journey that would change history. God chooses unlikely people for extraordinary tasks. Moses was chosen to lead his people to freedom. The adventure was just beginning. The God of the burning bush was about to shake the world. Moses returned to Egypt with his brother Aaron and demanded Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Pharaoh refused, making the Israelites work even harder. God sent plagues to show his power. The Nile turned to blood, frogs invaded, gnats and flies swarmed, livestock died, boils broke out, hail and locusts destroyed crops, and darkness covered Egypt. After each plague, Pharaoh's heart remained hard. The suffering in Egypt grew, but Pharaoh would not let the Israelites go. Each plague was a sign that God was stronger than any king. The Israelites watched as God fought for them. Pharaoh's stubbornness brought disaster on his own people. The stage was set for one final devastating plague. God's power was undeniable, and freedom was near. The Exodus was about to reach its turning point. The world would soon witness God's greatest act of deliverance. Now pause for a moment. If you're inspired by stories like this and you're thinking of sharing your own voice, whether on YouTube, Rumble, or anywhere, there's a tool I highly recommend: VidIQ. VidIQ helps creators like you generate video ideas, optimize your titles and tags, and even guide your content strategy. Think of it as a companion that helps your channel grow smarter, not harder. If you'd like to try it out, the link is right there in the description. It's what many creators use to make their content stand out. Now back to Exodus. God told Moses that one last plague would break Pharaoh's will, the death of every firstborn in Egypt. To protect the Israelites, God instructed them to mark their doors with lamb's blood. That night God passed through Egypt. Every house without the blood lost its firstborn, but the Israelites were spared. Pharaoh, broken by grief, finally ordered the Israelites to leave. The Egyptians urged them to go, giving them silver and gold. After 430 years, the Israelites were free at last. Passover became a night to remember God's protection and deliverance. The Israelites left Egypt in haste, ready for a new beginning. God's promise was fulfilled in a single, unforgettable night. The journey to the Promised Land had begun. The power of God's rescue would be remembered forever. The Exodus was underway. Freedom had come at last. The Israelites hurried out of Egypt, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Pharaoh changed his mind and chased after them with his army. Trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's chariots, the Israelites were terrified. Moses told them, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance the Lord will bring you." God instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. All night, a strong wind parted the waters, creating a path of dry land. The Israelites crossed safely, walls of water on either side. Pharaoh's army followed, but when the Israelites were safe, Moses stretched out his hand again. The sea crashed back, swallowing the Egyptian army. Not one of them survived. The Israelites were truly free, saved by God's mighty hand. Their enemies defeated, they sang songs of praise on the far shore. The journey to the Promised Land continued. God's power had turned fear into faith. The Red Sea crossing became a symbol of hope for generations. The Israelites marched forward, no longer slaves, but a people set free. The story of Exodus was far from over. After escaping Egypt, the Israelites traveled through the desert, often complaining and doubting. God provided for them with manna and water, guiding them to Mount Sinai. There, God called Moses up the mountain and gave him the 10 Commandments. These laws taught the people how to love God and each other. The Israelites promised to obey, and God made a covenant with them. The 10 Commandments became the foundation of their new life. God's presence came down on the mountain in fire and smoke. Moses stayed with God for 40 days, receiving the laws written on stone tablets. God was shaping a nation, not just freeing slaves. The Israelites were learning to live as God's people. The journey was about more than freedom. It was about faith. While Moses was on the mountain, the people grew impatient and made a golden calf to worship. Moses returned, saw their sin, and broke the stone tablets in anger. He pleaded with God to forgive them, and God, full of mercy, renewed his covenant. God gave Moses new tablets and detailed instructions to build the tabernacle, a special tent for his presence. The people brought gifts and built the tabernacle as God commanded. When it was finished, God's glory filled the tent, and the cloud of his presence guided them. God was now living among his people, leading them to the Promised Land. The tabernacle became a symbol of God's faithfulness and desire to be close to his people. Whenever the cloud moved, the Israelites followed. The story of Exodus is about rescue, love, and God's presence. God's people were never alone on their journey. The promise of freedom was fulfilled, and hope was alive. The journey continued, with God at the center of his people's lives.